GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net.
Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got a returning guest with me, Andrew Tapson. Now, I looked at the previous list of podcasts and thought it wasn't very long since I'd spoken to Andrew last, but turns out it was way back in episode 50. So, Andrew, welcome back. It's over 4 years since we had a conversation.
Clearly, as they say, Kevin, time flies when you're enjoying yourself. Yeah, I was a bit staggered. It was 2021. I guess we were probably post-COVID and doing all these strange things like jumping onto Zoom calls, which those of us a certain age didn't used to do. In terms of what's been going on in my world, as you know, I started up my business Pearl back in 2018. Now I've been going 7 years, and it continues to be, as I describe it, it continues to be like a deck of cards. There's a sort of choice as to what clients, customers, founders, entrepreneurs can select from. And we often dive into that deck as we go through a relationship. So to put it into sort of titular kind of stuff, there's fractional CFOing. So since I last saw you, I worked it out this morning. I've been working with about 15 different companies. They're pretty much product-led, entrepreneurial, early-stage businesses. So anything some of them are pre-revenue, but funded by VCs and grants, up to businesses turning over 3 or 5 million. The problems, as you can imagine, are similar but different. We can maybe go into that a little later on. So that's one element.
You've maintained the ability to stay away from big corporate. So I know we talked about that last time.
Yeah, it's very much small and beautiful, rough around the edges, problems to solve. But more importantly, really, it's about the relationship piece. So the sweet spot becomes when whatever it is you sort of go in to deal with the entrepreneur, could be a business plan, could be a financial forecast, could be a pitch deck, and many other things as well. And slowly we build that relationship and we unquestionably get to a position of trust. And the way I've always described it is when that moment's arrived, when on the Friday afternoon at 2:00, the phone goes, it's a founder, and they go, Andrew, just want to pick your brain about. And then we spend 25, 45 minutes just thrashing through a problem, trying to unpeel it, come up with what they're thinking about, how it might fit in. It could be thinking of that he or she is thinking about a new acquisition or a new product or changing something or didn't like the pricing on something. It could be anything. But really what they are finding is just how essentially lonely their job is at the top, where they're running their relatively small business, and having someone who's been there before and done it and got the scars, they find really helpful to just chat through. And as we often find in life, just chatting it through, you often come up with your own solution. So it's not that I bring some magic to the table other than 40 years of experience. So you bring that along and the magic happens.
You're now bringing that 40 years of experience along to our GrowCFO mentoring team.
That is the plan. So I think it's the combination of the experience and the approach where it's crucial to really understand what mentoring is about. For me, it's at the really, really simplest level. It is that point where the mentee brings their problem to the table and we're working out between ourselves, driven by the desires and the values and the thinking of the mentee, but guided by the mentor to come up with something that's workable. Funny enough, I was chatting to my darling wife about this just the other day. She said, you mean it's like coaching? And I said, no, dear. The thing about coaching, it's a bit like, imagine you were the coach of Manchester United. You don't stand there asking all the players what they think on how they're going to play left back today. You're coaching them. You're imparting your ideas very strongly onto the table. So it's probably an 80-20 kind of relationship. I see the mentoring piece much more the other way around, where a lot of the time it's 50-50, but a lot of the time it's 80-20 in the mentee's favor because they're bringing that stuff to the table.
Yeah. And you're drawing on that 40 years of experience, Andrew, and being able to tell them, well, I had a situation like this once. This is what I did, and it kind of worked. Or if I was doing it again, I'd do it a little bit different. How does this sound? And giving them that sort of advice.
Absolutely. And I think it's also that safe space where you're saying, you can put mistakes on the table. You can put the I don't knows on the table. You can put the what do you think's on the table, which often in any forms of corporate life, and don't forget, I spent time recently working with small businesses, but back in the day, I was working for a £3 billion asset finance company. So we had 300 employees. We weren't massive, but we were part of a massive organization. And it can be difficult sometimes to speak your mind. Not for me, I hasten to add, but I think sometimes in those kind of environments, people are a little bit scared of saying the wrong thing in front of the wrong people. But in the mentor-mentee space, it's confidential, and it's that ability to chuck stuff around and say, you know what, this won't work because I've got a problem with, Johnny won't believe that or won't understand that, or how do I deal with Johnny? Because he's a techie person and I don't speak the same language as techie people because I'm a salesperson or whatever it is, or I'm a finance person. So I think it's the advantage of having been around that block for a long time and spent a lot of time working across departments in a big organization, that ability to be able to speak many languages in business, not actually figuratively, is really helpful because of being a translator is such a crucial part of business life.
Now, last time we spoke, Andrew, and if anybody wants to find out a lot more about Andrew, and go and listen back to episode 50, when we were talking about you setting up that fractional CFO business and all the experience from corporate you're bringing into it. Now, you can find out a lot about Andrew's background in there. But as I recall, Andrew, a fair bit of your experience was around not just helping fast-growing organizations, but helping organizations to reduce cost and streamline.
In terms of corporate life? Yeah, very much so. I think it's very much part of corporate life where they go through reorganizations. Some organizations seem to go through reorganizations annually kind of thing. And inevitably their budget, very often they're budget driven, slash all costs by 5%. And some of it is actually being able to stand up and say, this isn't about necessarily slashing costs by 5%, but actually if we grow the top line by 10%, by spending 3%, we're 7% better off. So it's having the confidence to build stories around facts and then be able to analyze risk. And I think that to me has been an absolute bedrock of what I've always done, where you're looking for an optimal solution, not necessarily a solution that was put on the table in the first place.
Yeah. And I guess that's something great that you can bring along as a mentor to show somebody else or encourage somebody else to be able to do that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just that freedom to be able to think a little bit laterally, a little bit outside the box that says, oh, you know what? If we did it this way, we could. And I think it's looking at those scenarios and don't always accept there's only one answer to a particular solution. Yeah.
So if we're thinking mentee, now, what sort of background would your ideal mentee be working in?
My answer to these questions are always along the lines of anything and everything. And I think that's the key to it, to me, isn't the technicality of whether is it manufacturing? Is it oil and gas? Is it banking? Is it blah, 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 blah. I think over the last 7 years, I've worked with 40 different organizations. Unquestionably, some of them have been in the same vertical, but they have covered an awful lot of different verticals. And the bit that one realizes is, and it comes back to what I talked about, I call my clients, product-led entrepreneurs. You talk to them and on the first blush, it's what on earth are they talking about? They're clearly excited by their invention or their product or whatever it is. And as you talk, as I listen to what they're saying, I'm trying to formulate in my mind, so what are the drivers and levers of this business? And it doesn't come down to one model, clearly, but it doesn't come down to very many. So I think it is that piece of accepting that actually somebody who doesn't have your particular vertical's direct experience is actually probably and possibly an advantage because they're not blindsided by this is the way we always do it in oil and gas. It's just like, okay, let's put a problem on the table. Let's summarize the problem. Let's analyze the problem and work collectively and laterally to come up with a solution to it. If we only can think in one dimension, we come up with a one-dimensional solution.
Yeah. And in fact, take that oil and gas example, if you're talking to somebody who doesn't have that oil and gas background, they can be putting something on the table for you to think about that's a little bit outside of the box for you and might just work.
Yeah, for me, absolutely. It works every time. But one of my favorite stories in this space, one of my entrepreneurs, I was talking to him earlier this morning, and I still can't explain exactly what he does, but it's something to do with using sound waves to split cells for biochemistry, for biochemistry testing. All extremely clever. But his product, the way he was describing it to me in a planning meeting we were at, I'm getting more and more confused by what it is. My brain's whirring, going, how can I turn this into my speak and also the speak of potentially other people at the board table. And slowly but surely we were talking, and I came up with this analogy that was, so are you making a car or are you making the engine? And the look on the guy's face was like, you've just nailed it. What we're doing, even though we were talking about bits and bytes and apples and what's and all kinds of stuff, actually we were building the engine to go into somebody else's car. It was such a simple analogy, probably oversimple, but it just meant that every time we spoke as a group afterwards, we didn't have to go into the idiosyncrasies of whether it had a bell or a whistle added onto it. Are we talking about the engine here or are we talking about the car here?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you then go on to think about investors. You're going to go on and talk to angel investors, venture capitalists, whatever they might be, as the CFO in the team. And if you can be the person that can bridge that tech speak of the owner into normal speak for the investor, that has to be a great advantage.
I totally agree, Kevin. And I think some of the advantage of that was, as I think I said before, was, those years and years in corporate and my last 15 years at part of this Dutch asset finance company based in the UK, we had 6 departments who really couldn't talk to each other because they spoke different languages. But actually, equally, when we were talking to shareholders and maybe to our external customers, actually having that ability to talk in language they understood, but acting as that translator. It'd be like if we were speaking to a French person, quote unquote, there's no point in speaking English to them because they probably don't understand it. But if we can speak French, then how useful is that? So my thing is, I can speak business. You tell me what your business is, I'll be able to speak it.
Yeah. So, Andrew, you've been in the fractional CFO space now for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly been very successful. You've got lots of clients, which is amazing because I remember the story that you told me last time we spoke about how all it started from a meeting in the pub when you'd moved location, you didn't know anybody, and you've built quite a business. So now, if you've got all these clients around and you can get that phone call from the CEO on a Friday afternoon, I've got this problem, and you've got all of those things sparking your brain, what is it that makes you want to get into mentoring?
I think it's the higher level thing of what this is all about. It's about helping people. And I think if you look at that family, the sort of the pearl work, the core pearl work is all about helping those entrepreneurs make the best from their business. And if I wind back to what I'm going to call it a job, it was never a job, was being a parent. So you're bringing on your own kids to grow through their formative years and their teenage years and their 20s and their 30s. I think my eldest is not quite 40 yet, but I think that sort of fostering of knowledge and guiding of people works with founders at the fractional CFO level. It works when I do my non-exec work because it's very much not doing, but guiding and governance and a not insignificant amount of mentoring my client board. And so I think I see this as just another level of being able to help the next generation in solving their problems by tapping into someone who's been there before. It's not to say that's the only way of doing it, but it's a half decent way of getting into your portfolio.
So, yeah, I get that completely. And I'm coming very much from the school of wanting to give back to the next generation as well, which is the whole reason I got into GrowCFO in the first place. So I totally get that. And I think if the likes of you and I just go and retire and walk away with all of that knowledge, that is such a waste. Yeah.
Yeah. The key thing with all of this is, you know what? It doesn't feel like work. It feels like fun. And actually the satisfaction levels are immense. Whether it's, you can have, how many calls have I had today? And there's like 2 or 3 calls a day kind of thing. And this session, and every one has been different, but every one you come out with a smile on your face because you've gotten your brains ticking and you're going, wow, that was great.
Yeah. But Andrew, at the same time, we're getting older. The workplace is very, very different to the one that you and I both started off in many years ago. In particular, the rate of change we've got in tech at the moment within the AI innovations that are going on right now, it is moving so fast. How do you think you're staying relevant to what the next generation needs?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm going to take us down a path that you may not be expecting now. One of the things that I do on a Tuesday morning is I volunteer at the Citizens Advice and spend 3 or 4 hours on the phones listening to people who've got nobody else to talk to about a problem. It sounds a bit like mentoring in a way, But it's different. But the point is not to feel like in that position, and I think this is the same with your question, is you don't have to have the answer to all the questions. What you need to have is a level of being dangerous whereby your approach and your curiosity can allow both the solution to be solved by both the people on the call, but also you can go away, somebody, either the mentor, probably, hopefully the mentee, can go away and research something and say, have you thought about looking at this? Have you thought about looking at that? And actually, it's just knowing that those resources exist. And so having a network of useful people, certainly if I look at my earlier self, my corporate self, I had no network of useful people. I had 50 people in I'm going to call a Rolodex, not that it was, but they were just people in my industry. They weren't a network. They were just people I knew kind of thing. They weren't much use to me subsequently. Whereas now you end up with a network, let's call it your LinkedIn network. You might have 1,500, 2,000 people. If you need something doing, there's always someone useful in there.
Yeah, that is something that is a real change, the size of your network and the ability to network with somebody who isn't local. I remember most of my networking things further back in my career was usually turn up somewhere in a physical location and you were networking with people that were local to you. Now I'm networking with people all over the globe.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but for me, and I know everybody's approach is very different, I'm very selective with who I network with. I want to have a totally relevant to me network. I know people who they'll quote unquote network and connect with anybody and everybody because they probably want visibility. They can't possibly know 20,000 people. I couldn't know 20,000 people. But if I need a commercial officer or I need a CTO or this, that, or the other, I've got them in my network. And so they're the kind of people I can grab hold of, as you say, immediately on LinkedIn. They'll get back to me in 24 hours. We've got a train of thought moving.
Yeah. And that's actually something I talk about. We've got our Future CFO program, GrowCFO. Module 5 is all about networking. And one of the things that I try to put over to the future CFOs on there is the need to have that network of people that can support you around you. And I talk about that sort of close network, but I'm also saying, well, hang on a minute, you're going to be in various situations throughout your career where you're going to need the advice of somebody who's not necessarily in that close network. It's really useful to find that elusive person that kind of knows everybody and can open doors for you. And I think that's a brilliant place where a mentor like you actually comes in, Andrew.
Yeah, I think that whole thing's multifaceted, isn't it? Because it's people who can open doors. It's people who've got experiences that are tangential to yours, if that's English. So you're looking down this pipe in a particular way. You want someone to look down the same pipe, but see something different and actually go, oh, had you seen the whatever it is? I know lots of analogies going on here, but I think that's a useful person to have. You want people who can execute for you. You want people who can recruit for you. You want people who can recruit you, who are looking out for finding your next job for you. There's a whole load of people, but people won't do that unless they understand the person. So you've got to invest time into those relationships so that they're worthwhile. Having just a transactional relationship to me is not enough. I want a relationship that actually says, no, Kevin, if I need to, you know who I am, you know what I'm about. I can call you once every 5 years kind of thing. And it's just like we can talk about the things that need talking about. That's how I see my network is we're not in close contact, but we've done quality work with each other or had quality conversations such that you can get in touch many years later.
Yeah, I think that is so important. And you look at the breadth of the role of the CFO these days, it is enormous. And you've got CFOs who are doing things that are much wider than just running the finance function of business. I see CFOs that are running legal, are running property, are running HR, are running IT, and being able to reach out in all of those areas for people that kind of know the detail is really important.
I think it's really fascinating. There seems to be quite a lot of chat about the sort of broadening of the CFO role certainly across LinkedIn at the moment. And I have to say, when I was doing my CFO role, which was back in 2012, for goodness sake, it was 13 years ago, it was exactly all of that. It was just like all that stuff I was doing because actually I couldn't see how I could be a CFO. It wasn't to have my detailed tentacles in every pie, but I needed to understand about how the facility worked, what we were spending on facilities, what we were spending on IT, what the IT strategy was, what the sales strategy was. So how can you possibly do a budget? How can you do a forecast? How can you understand what the future of this business can look like without understanding every single part? And every single part doesn't mean understand it just from the numbers point of view. It's understanding the strategic goals and how that ties into overall strategic goals of the business. So that's why the CFO role is actually the most interesting.
And actually, I'm a little bit cynical about all those posts on LinkedIn myself. And there are those ones there about the broadening of the CFO role. I personally don't believe it's any broader today than it was 10 years ago either. I also look at those ones that are coming up and talking about things like continual forecasting being a new thing, fast close being a new thing. I was talking to clients about doing that 25 years ago in PwC. There's nothing new.
The danger with fast close eventually is you'll be closing the books before the month has started.
That's a good idea.
It's called putting the budget in the numbers.
It's like a finance director that goes in to see the CEO, and the CEO says, "What's the profit this month?" And the CFO then replies, "What would you like it to be?"
Like it to be. Yeah, exactly. We've all worked with people like that.
So, Andrew, are there any areas that you'd say you bring that little bit extra, that you're the subject matter expert or anything like that in, that you'd be putting forward to a potential mentee?
I think they're not technical areas, but I think one of the key parts of where I've evolved as a person over probably the last 25 years is really understanding the whole piece around emotional intelligence and the ability to connect with people. If I go back to the old version of me, I was probably a classic numbers person who was happy as talking to my own spreadsheets and that kind of stuff. But I think as I've evolved as a human being, it sounds a bit grandiose, but if I look at my bookshelf just over there, it's just, you look at the books and you've got books like, for example, like from Brené Brown and people like that. So it's really understanding the psychology of human beings. And I think that makes me, by definition, someone who's very full of curiosity. And you come to me with a thing you want to talk about, we'll find something to talk about and we'll get something good out of it. So I think it's more, if you want something that's very narrow, I can go very narrow. But if I'm honest and say, where's my sweet spot? It's like, we put anything on the table and we can go down channels or we can go down pipes and we can go roundabout, but we'll bring it back to a focal point. So this isn't just a waffly chat about nothing. It's going to come out with action plans and timescales and smart objectives, all those kind of buzzy words that we get taught. But there's a reason for that. It's because they actually work.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned a former version of yourself that was happier talking to the spreadsheet. I think that's something real to think about when we're looking at the challenges of the new CFO. Now, you've come out of that background of financial control, head of finance. You have been steeped in those spreadsheets. You've been steeped in getting the monthly accounts put together, annual budget put together. Suddenly you're CFO and you've got somebody else to do all that stuff for you. You haven't got that comfort blanket over the Excel spreadsheet really, because somebody else is doing it. Instead, you've suddenly got to become, rather than the internal finance person, you've got to become the external finance person. Talking to the investors, talking to the customers, talking to the suppliers, co-pilot to the CEO. And that is, to me, that is literally all about relationships. It's all about soft skills. It's all about storytelling. And that emotional intelligence piece is the key to it all.
It is that ability to read the room and realize that investor A is struggling with something and investor B gets it and investor C is something, is looking at his phone kind of thing. And it's just, okay, it's not to be so easy to get annoyed with investor C because they're looking at their phone, but you're in danger of just alienating investors A and B if you were to, goodness only knows, have a pop at investor C kind of thing. So it is some of that stuff where you just learn you teach yourself some skills. You're not going to know them all on day one. It's just, if you're learning to play tennis, you're not going to have mastered the topspin backhand lob on day one, but you might be able to get the ball back in play. Well, actually, do you know what? Keep the ball in play. Give you half a chance.
And a lot of this stuff you learn by lots and lots of experience. You keep the ball in play. You'll keep it in play better next time and better again the time after. So having that wise head that's been around doing this for a long time as a sounding board, to me, is a no-brainer.
It is. And again, you're going somewhere where I thought you were going to go, and that is what is good enough. I think there's probably when you're back in that spreadsheet world, You were probably a bit too much of a perfectionist. As you come into the CFO world, good enough is usually good enough. And it's actually working out where good enough is so that you can, you're no good as a CFO for the business if you're working 20-hour days. That doesn't get us anywhere. What we need is your brain fresh and sparking so that you can do all those things that you alluded to, talking to investors, talking to shareholders, talking to the CEO, talking to the bank, going out and talking to customers. You've got to be wearing lots of hats at different times. And you've got to be able to think on your feet and be sharp. You cannot be weighed down by, what was the paperclip budget? That's not your stuff anymore.
No. I think one of the big challenges when you take that first CFO role is learning to step away from that detail, learning to delegate.
It is absolutely true. This clearly only comes in a particular situation where if you've come up through the ranks in a particular business and then you pop out as the CFO, you do have a massive advantage to me because you know those numbers like the back of your hand. And so actually you've got a great building block that you can take into situations where you can talk about margins and marketing budgets and the IT spend with incredible degrees of certainty because you know those numbers really well. But you shouldn't then rest on your laurels and think, okay, now I've now got to take that as my foundation and build on it and do all this other stuff that actually no one's going to tell me how to do it from within the business. They're just going to expect that you gain it. So actually having a mentor in your corner is a pretty sharp idea, really.
Yeah, that is one of the problems is that you're expected to be able to do this stuff. But hey, nobody taught you how to do most of that stuff to pass your exams, did they?
Funny that. I wasn't going to talk about when my exams were, but anyway, that's a different one.
Yeah. No, I think that's a subject we should avoid.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Andrew, that has been a really, really insightful conversation. And I think you've got so much to offer as one of our CFO mentoring team. Thank you for being this week's guest on the GrowCFO show.
It's been my pleasure, Kevin. Good to see you again.